Cool. Right, well, I'll see you guys in half an hour, I guess.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Door to Door. I'm Virginia Stanley, joined here by my colleague, Lainey Mays from the HarperCollins Library Marketing Department. And we have a really, really special episode today for you. We are joined by Justine Cowan, two debut authors, two memoirs, Justine Cowan and Georgina Lawton, author of Raceless. Justine Cowan's book is out in is January, and Raceless is coming out in February. The Secret Life of Dorothy Soames by Justine Cowan. These are two. I'm hearing that noise again. I don't know what that noise is. What is that? Now it stopped. It was Lainey. What is that? Okay, it doesn't matter. So we have, as I say, we have two debut memoirs and really interesting stories about family and about history. We've been talking before we went live just now, and it's been really fascinating listening to both of these authors talk about their books. I'm going to turn it over to Justine and then to Georgina just for a second to give us a little snapshot of their book, and then we're going to talk to Justine for a bit. Then we're going to talk to Georgina, and then they're both going to come in the back at the end of this and talk to each other, because there is definitely connective tissue between these two books. So Justine, do you want to just say a few words about your book?
Sure. So my name's Justine, and I wrote The Secret Life of Dorothy Soames. And it's a memoir about my mother's life at the Hospital for the Maintenance and Education of Exposed and Deserted Young Children, also known as the Foundling Hospital. And I'm so excited to be doing this with Library Fest, because I love libraries and I love books. And there's actually a really poignant moment in the book about libraries and books, both for me and my mother. And so I hope we'll get to that. I know we don't have a lot of time, but hopefully we'll get to share that. And so thank you everyone for joining in.
Thanks, Justine. Okay, and Georgina, you want to talk just a few secs about Raceless?
Yeah, so it's a memoir about growing up in a white family, reflecting on my childhood and trying to work out why I am not white, and piecing together sort of family secrets that I knew about and suspected but couldn't quite decipher on my own. So it's a journey that takes me from my family and then traveling around the world in Black communities, which helped me develop my identity, I guess. It's also including some snippets and interviews from other people who have gone through similar sort of family secrets and battles with their identity. So yeah, it's a book that's set in London, but it really takes me around the world on this kind of search for self. And I also look at the DNA testing industry and how that impacted my story as well. So a lot to unpack, a lot to write as well, but I'm happy it's finally going out into the world in February.
Very exciting, really exciting. And the both of these books are such powerful reads. And as I say, Lainey and I were just listening to both of you speak. And so what we'll do is have you both on it at the end of the show, just to talk to each other, because there is a lot of shared experience in a strange way. Obviously not exactly, but there's a lot there. So Georgina, we're going to put you into the virtual green room.
Okay.
Which means you get to eat virtual M&Ms.
Amazing. See you in a bit.
See you in a bit. Bye. Hello.
Hello.
So, congratulations. This book is really, really so wild. Lainey and I were talking about this book, and we were remarking on how you were surprised at how much information you were able to uncover at the Foundling. So I want to just send it back to you. Here's the jacket, right? How do you like the jacket?
Oh, I love it. Because it really epitomizes the story that it's a secret there's a story within a story. And I mean, one of the reasons I was able to put together so much information about my mother's life as a foundling was because she had also written a memoir. And so it's really, in some ways, a memoir within a memoir.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful, I think. It's just literally bursting through the story that needs to be told. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the book? Naturally, we don't want to spoil anything because while this is a memoir, it certainly does read like it's like something you've never read before, and there's a lot to unfold here, and we don't want to take that away from the joy of the reader. But why don't you just let people know what you want them to know about the book?
Sure. Whenever anyone asks me about, what's the book about, I always have to think about, well, where exactly am I going to start? Because one of the themes of the book is the connectedness of history, in that there were events in the 1700s that actually impacted whether or not my mother and I had a loving relationship 250 years later. And so I always have to think about, so where do I begin? So I think what I'll do is I'll begin when I was 19 years old. When I was 19 years old, I was in college, and my father called me home to take care of my mother because she had been driving down the road, hysterical, looking for the hospital, even though she wasn't ill. And so I went home to take care of her so my father could go to work. And there's a little bit of a scene out of the Sunset Boulevard. I walk down a dark, a long hall, and I walk into my mother's room, and it's dark, and she's sitting on the bed. And there's light coming in through the curtains, and she has a notepad in her hands, and she's writing over and over and over again. And you can see like deep indents in the paper. She's writing the name Dorothy Soames, Dorothy Soames, Dorothy Soames. And we never spoke about Dorothy Soames again in my lifetime. And it wasn't until after she died that I sent an email to a stranger in London. And that took me on my journey where I would go back and forth across the Atlantic, several times to learn about my mother's life at the hospital for the maintenance and education of exposed and deserted young children. She had always told me that she had been raised, that we had blue blood going through our veins. But then what I learned was that she had been a foundling. And it was called commonly the Foundling Hospital. And it was started by a king in the 1700s to raise illegitimate children to clean chamber pots for Britain's ruling class. And it also became this cultural center, oddly enough, where, for example, William Hogarth, put art on the walls of the Foundling Hospital. It became the first public art gallery in all of England and the precursor to the Royal Academy of Arts. And a composer wrote a little tune, but no one would really listen to it. And he went around Ireland and all over. And then he ended up playing it at the Foundling Hospital in the chapel. And everyone in London came. And that's how come every year we listen to Handel's Messiah. And so it's really just this incredibly rich history at the Foundling Hospital, but behind closed doors, it was a brutal institution where leather straps and canes and locking children in closets was common. And that's where my mother was raised under the name of Dorothy Soames, because her identity had to be hidden to hide the shame of her illegitimate birth. And there was a headmistress that came out of a Dickens novel. But all the while, there was a war raging during World War II, and she planned a daring escape across England, not knowing that her mother was trying to get her back. So that's the story in a nutshell. But I won't give any spoilers.
As I say, it reads like a novel. This story that of the life that she lived, and the story of your unveiling it and it coming to light. And just reading your book is very powerful, and it's really arresting. I mean, not especially, I mean, throughout the book, but when she's writing that, and you talk about how it's like indented in the paper, and it's like, and why, there's so many things that It was so sad and so I mean it seemed like it was so locked away, but then it was coming out, you know, just
Right. Well, it was, I mean, that's what you learn is that, you know, a family will keep a secret, but it spills out. And it spills out into the family because you can't keep a secret from the people that you know you live with day in, day out.
yeah, yeah. And that's sort of what we were talking about before when Georgina was on, just that how terrible, you know, when parents raise kids and shrouded in secrecy. It's very damaging. And so do we have photographs? Do you want to show them? And then you want to tell us what we're looking at?
Sure. So this is a photograph of the Foundling Hospital campus in Berkhamsted, which is just outside of London. And as you can see, we have here the foundlings are lined up for a publicity shot on the opening day of the new campus. You know, it was started in the 1700s, but they moved the campus out here in the 1930s. And as you can see, each of the girls is all dressed in these outfits, and these outfits were actually designed by William Hogarth, the artist, in the 1700s. And here we are in the 1930s, and they're still wearing the exact same uniforms, and with the little white tippets, and that is the chapel right behind them. You can go on to the next photo. And so it was common. There's a lot of photos of the foundlings, but most of them were posed. And so this is obviously, you can tell that it's a posed photo. And it's interesting because they always show these happy foundlings, and the grounds are actually quite beautiful. And I actually went to England and wandered around them. But behind closed doors is where you really saw brutality. But this is just yet another example of a posed shot. And when I was there, I met one of my mother's former classmates, and there's another photo of children sitting around playing with toys. And she mentioned that and she's in that photo, and she said that they gave them all the toys for the photo and then took them away afterwards. So that's how posed it was. So this is an example of a dormitory. So the dormitories were very plain. As you can see, the children were not allowed to have any sort of belongings. They didn't have comforters with different colors, and it was a very monochromatic life.
Yeah.
So one aspect of the Foundling Hospital is that it's to raise illegitimate children to serve the Britain's ruling class, but it had another purpose as well. And the other purpose was to save a woman who had fallen and who had gotten pregnant outside of marriage. But they want to restore a woman to her previous place, which means that she had to have some sort of respectability to be returned to. And so before a child could be admitted to the Foundling Hospital, the mother had to go through a very strict application process and had to go under the scrutiny to see whether or not she was actually a respectable and moral woman, except for her one lapse. And this is an example of my grandmother's application process, where they went out and they talked to her pastor, her doctor, and her brother. And they all were all interviewed and wrote letters to determine whether or not my grandmother had sufficient moral character to have her child placed in the Foundling Hospital, and would she be returned back. And you can see here that the language of these letters is always so interesting. I have never heard the slightest hint or suggestion of any moral turpitude in her character. In fact, the recent lapse came as a great surprise to me. And from what I know of her, I am pretty certain it will never happen again. And that is from her doctor.
Incredible.
And I think we have one last photo. And so this was, so when you gave up a child, at the very beginning, a woman, usually it was the mother, gave up the child, and she would leave a small token to show that this was her child in the event, in the hopes that maybe someday she would get her child back again. It didn't happen often, but there was always that hope. And then at some point in the 1800s, they started giving out this receipt. So you would give up the child, and then they would give you a receipt. And this is the receipt that was given for my mother. And Charles Dickens actually wrote about this receipt in an article in the magazine that he did. It was called Received a Blank Child. And so this was the actual receipt for my mother. And I think that's it for the photos.
That is absolutely incredible. They're arresting and so stark, that one picture of the cots, and they're all, God, monochromatic life. Heartbreaking. You have a piece you mentioned before. There's a section in the book that refers to the library and how, in a way, it's sort of saved your mother. I believe that's what you said. Do you want to read that piece?
Sure. Let me give you just a little bit of background before I do. And just how libraries and books were really important in my life and my mother's life. For me, libraries was the safe haven where I would go, and the librarian, of course, knew my name, and I would go in and I would want my recommendations, and then I would come home with piles of books. But it was also the time when there wasn't a lot of tenderness between me and my mother. I don't know if that's because she was British or because she was raised at the Foundling Hospital. There is some argument about that. But the time that she was really tender is when we would read books together. And she would open a book and I would curl up next to her and we would read, for example, Dickens. And when we would read Dickens, I had no idea the connection between my mother's life and Charles Dickens. And in fact, he was a patron of the Foundling Hospital, and it's probably not surprising to anyone at this point in the story that this is where he received his inspiration for Oliver Twist and Little Dorrit. For example, the founder of the Foundling Hospital was named Thomas Coram, and if you've read Little Dorrit, you know that Tatty Coram is named in homage to Thomas Coram. And my mother was named the same way that Oliver Twist was named. And Oliver Twist, he was named in alphabetical order by a caloric man named Mr. Bumble. And I envisioned that my mother was named in a similar way. So while Dickens received his inspiration for his stories, it's unlikely that as a child, my mother was allowed to read that. They were taught to read, but they weren't encouraged to read, and they couldn't take books out of the classroom. And interestingly enough, there actually was a library, and it had big French windows, and it was beautiful, and they had books that were donated, but the children were not allowed to take books out of the library. And when you read the book, you'll see that my mother was very precocious and did get in trouble a bit. But she would sneak into the library and steal books. And if she'd been discovered, she would have been beaten and branded a thief. But the risk was worthwhile for her because it really provided her a glimpse into a life that was outside of her sequestered world, where these foundlings were actually treated almost like prisoners. And so I'm just going to read just 2 paragraphs about her experience sneaking into the library and stealing a book. One day, she found a book that spoke of a land she had heard of only through whispered asides with other girls and conversations overheard in the hallways. The story started on a river that was grander than any Dorothy had ever imagined, one that spanned farther than the eye could see and flowed for thousands of miles. It was about a young man who, at the age of 19, operated a flatboat for $8 a month, traversing the Mississippi, carting farm goods, corn, salt, pork, and other commodities. Dorothy soaked up the stories of the strange and foreign land and the young man who was born in a one-room log cabin. She followed his progress as he worked as a laborer, taught himself the law, and then rose to become the 16th president of the United States, eventually emancipating millions of people held in bondage. To a young girl whose life had already been laid out before her, who was seemingly in bondage herself. It was difficult to imagine that there could be a place where someone poor and insignificant could become great. Her heart leapt at the thought that there might be hope, that maybe she could escape her fate in a place called America.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you. Lainey, do you have questions besides our librarian pals?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of great comments. Jennifer Winberry said, amazing to have that receipt. Goosebumps looking at that.
Yeah.
I guess I wondered while reading it, what, obviously it's not out yet, and you'll get a lot of response. And we had talked about this before we were on, but have you gotten anybody reaching out and saying, oh, I really related to this, or maybe you said you met your classmates of your mother. So I don't know if you have any stories yet.
Sure. Well, we've given out some advanced copies, and so I've started to get some of those comments back, and there's a couple of things. One is it's hard for people to believe that the story is true, but no one could make it up. And that's something that I actually felt frequently when I was writing the book and doing all of the research, where when you read the book, there's snippets that I knew here and there, but when I finally got the full sense of everything that had happened, I was, it would astonish me frequently that it all had actually happened. And then the other comment that I got was people who had difficult parents or a difficult relationship, how exactly it was, how they reconcile themselves with that kind of relationship. So, because I was always taught that I had to love my mother, but I had a very difficult mother. And so how in the world do you reconcile those feelings that you have for a parent?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there that have had those similar kinds of thoughts.
For sure. Maureen Roberts from Baltimore says, was your father aware of your mother's story, and did you find anything about your mother's parents?
And the second part was, did I find anything about my mother's parents? Well, the first thing is I do believe that my father was fully aware of the story. As to the second part, that would be a little bit too much of a spoiler. So I think I might not answer that one.
Well, Maureen, you're going to have to read it. There are so many people just saying how they can't wait to read this because it's really, and again, the receipt is, yes. Okay. And let's see, Jennifer Winberry, you sort of talked about this before, but what she wants to know, what was the impetus for for looking for your mother's history?
Well, it actually started, after my mother had died, I really wanted to put all of the past behind me. And it was actually a fateful trip to London where we were wandering around, and that's where I knew that my mother was born. And wandering around those streets after my mother had died, I was really overwhelmed with a sense of loss. And that's something that I explore in the book, that sometimes it can be harder to lose. It's a different experience to lose someone that you had a difficult relationship with. And it was really just a couple of years later that I started to almost feel compelled to understand those emotions. And I hate to use the word closure because it sounds a little bit trite, but I think that there is a little bit of something in there. Not to give too many spoilers, but my mother went on a similar journey at about the same time in her life. And so I wonder whether or not there's a certain part of our humanness that at some point in our life, we really want to understand how we got to the place that we are.
That's brave.
Yeah. A lot of comments about how this would be great for book discussions. And I know you had mentioned that before.
Yes.
How much yeah.
Well, and I love, and there's a lot of different topics that can be discussed, and we plan to get to put together a book kit. So definitely look out for that. And I love, I really like to connect with people about this because I feel that the story is something that's hard to believe that it happened, but it still has a real element of humanness that we all feel in terms of dealing with a difficult parent, and how the past connects, impacts our current lives, and lots of different themes that we all experience. And so I really do enjoy talking about that. So if there's any interest in me popping into book clubs, I also already have some library talks set up, and I would love to set up more. And there's few silver linings in this pandemic, but one of those is that I can pop into libraries all over the country. So I would love to do a little virtual traveling into libraries across the country. So I think that would be a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I think you just said that so perfectly, because it's so hard to say, well, here's the upside. There is no upside, but there is this, if there's anything, if there's in respect to what we are doing, is that we are able to bring authors to librarians who are, eating this up and just looking for these kinds of stories. I mean, you'll see the comments later. I mean, book club, nonfiction that reads like fiction. I mean, it's really something. So librarians, please reach out to us. You can reach out directly to Justine if you'd like to, but we're happy to facilitate that, because this has got a lot in this book, and it's very, very complex. Let's see. So we have like one more minute, and we have a couple more questions. Let's see. Oh, we have Anita Slade, who says, I do author events at my library. Would love to talk with you. Terrific. Anita, send us an email. Send an email to Lainey, and you know how to get in touch with her. Lainey Mays. Or Lainey can reach out to you. Vicky Nesting wants to know, do you think your relationship with your mother would have been different if you had known all this before she died?
Oh, well, I have thought about that question many times, and I'm not sure if my relationship would have been different between us, because I put space between us because she was a difficult woman. I think that maybe I would have been different, because I would have understood why we had a difficult relationship, because I think that it's common when a parent and a child has a difficult relationship for the child to blame themselves. And that was definitely something that I did. And I was constantly wondering, did I do something? Where was I to blame? And I remember this really poignant moment that was the start of my journey, as I was standing in the Foundling Museum in London, which is not far from the British Museum. And I was standing in this room, and it was when the full weight of what had happened to my mother and had, just really came upon me. And I was overwhelmed with the sense that for the first time, that it wasn't all of my fault, and it wasn't all of my mother's fault, but that we were swept up in a really difficult time in history and a dark part of England's past.
Wow. Thank you for that. I would like to end this section right now before we put you on a virtual green room. Wonderful reviews have come in from Publishers Weekly and Kirkus. I love this one from Christina Baker Klein, author of so many books, including Orphan Train. And she says, the secret life of Dorothy Soames is the gripping story of a daughter's quest to find the truth about her mother's origins, and in the process, come to terms with her own life and choices, a riveting, heartbreaking, and ultimately healing journey of discovery. I thought that was a really wonderful quote, and pretty much, captures what this book is. So, thank you so much for coming on. And now we're going to say, see you in a little while, and then we'll see you in a little bit.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Justine, thank you so much. Talk to you in a bit. Okay.
So beautiful.
Beautiful,
So-
powerful.
So special that both of these people are sharing
I know.
amazing things with us. So Georgina, we're bringing her back on.
Yay. Georgina, where are you? Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, very good, thank you.
Were you able to watch that?
Yeah, a little bit just towards the end there.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. And as I said, we would love to have her come back on, and so that we can, the two of you can talk, and we'll just chat a little bit. But this is really powerful stuff, and talking about parents who raise their kids, but there's some secrecy there, and how that's just never a good thing. So now let's turn to your book, Raceless.
Yes.
This is another powerful memoir that
Thank you.
we're honored to have this book on our list as well, and we can't wait to hear you talk about this. This is just I don't want to take the words out of your mouth, so I'm going to let you. I could do that, but let's hear from you. Again, we want people to tell them what you want them to know about your book, and we also have thanks to you, some wonderful photographs that we can share. So just give them a outline of the book.
Okay, yeah. So Raceless is a memoir, a family memoir also. It is about my search for self, having been born into an entirely white family and looking the way I do, which is not white. And this was a sort of badly kept secret that remained kind of a secret in my family for over 20 years, even though I constantly asked questions about why I looked the way I did and why I differed to my family. And my mum is Irish Catholic and my dad's British English, and it just wasn't spoken about. So I had to go on this big journey all by myself to find out kind of why we didn't speak about race, why we didn't speak about the truth about my parentage. And it kind of came to a head when my dad passed away in 2015. And I went on this big journey, found out that he wasn't my biological dad, and that I had ancestry and another parent, another dad, I guess, from a different part of the world. So I traveled to all these different countries, Black majority countries, to try and see myself reflected in a diaspora that I just hadn't been a part of. And I came into contact with other people who had similar stories to me. I came into contact with geneticists, DNA experts, because I found out all this information via a series of DNA tests. And I really just took the time to uncover, more about myself, but to also accept my own identity and accept my Blackness for what it is, and accept my relationship with my family for not just for what it is, but to ask for a stronger, better relationship with them based on truth and based on trust. And that was, a long period of time, all that was going on. So it's very much like, the past few years have been put into Raceless, and what I've discovered about myself and my family, and kind of what that says about race and identity in Western society. That's something that I've tried to put into the book.
It was interesting when we were talking before we went live about how it, because you were a child. And so, when you were saying, when people would say, well, what, how did you not know this? You were a kid and you trusted your family. And I said to you, you're looking at the world through your eyes. And it's what else would a child think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were saying earlier, it is a psychological, I guess, method of wanting to belong. It's a psychological tool of control in a way, because as a child, if you're told, the sky is pink and that is the color pink that you're looking at every day, that is how you start to define the word pink. And with me, I just didn't really know what it meant to be Black. I could see myself in the mirror every day. Of course, I could see my hair, I could see my facial features. But when I went to my parents, they would say, we don't need to talk about that. And, you're not Black. That was said a couple of times as well. And I'd look and say, okay, well, that's the word Black, and that doesn't belong to me. That doesn't have any bearing on my identity. And it was a, really confusing time. I had a really happy childhood. And other than that, my parents were really, hands-on. My dad was really hands-on. but I think there was a distance between us in terms of being able to, not even to relate to each other, because if I didn't, get told by other people outside of the family that I was different, I often didn't think about it. It was other people in the street or people on holiday that we met, or other Black kids that I met as I became a teenager. They would tell me, oh, that doesn't work, that must be rubbish, your family aren't your own, you must be adopted. That was what started to infiltrate my kind of little bubble of protectiveness. But when I was alone with my family, it was like a loving, happy upbringing, other than the general feeling of sort of alienation that would come up every month, every couple of months, and then with increasing frequency as I got older. So yeah, it was both. And I've tried to put that across in Raceless as well, that I had an otherwise content upbringing, and I was very lucky in many ways, but there was also this level of identity erasure that was going on at the same time that was really hard to vocalize, because I didn't want to be separated from my family, and I didn't want to cause any sort of trouble or cause any kind of row, which I kind of suspected even as a young kid that me talking about race and me asking about my features would cause. So I just learned to bury it all, and yeah, that wasn't healthy for me either. So it's been kind of a freeing process writing all this.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. How did this make you feel, getting this older? And also, I was reading this for those on Edelweiss. There are two really wonderful pieces that Georgina has written. One, and they're available for you to read. One is from The Guardian, and one is Marie Claire. And there's a line here where your father says, I'm trying to find the actual sentence, because he said, you're mine. Or I'm paraphrasing what your dad had said, but he just said, you're mine. When you asked him again, he just said, you belong to me. It just seems so sweet, and so like they just had, it seems like they had gone so far that there wasn't any going back. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess that is one way of looking at it. It was so taboo within our family to identify me as Black, to even allude to the idea that I was Black, because that would mean that someone, either of them, my parents, were not telling the truth. So we were so deep into that level of acceptance that this is just the way it is, that even when my dad was ill and I said to him, listen, I know that things are bad in the family right now, and I don't want to cause any more pain, because I know how ill you are, but I just feel like I've always wanted to get to the bottom of why I don't look like you and why I don't look like mum. Can we talk about this? And he said, yeah, that's absolutely fine. If you want to get a DNA test whilst I'm here, I support you, but I know that you're mine. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, I know that you're mine. And that was enough for me in that moment, because I thought, I didn't want to, it's something I still, grapple with to this day. Was it a good idea? Was it not? Like, should I have forced those difficult conversations? But it was such a difficult time. And I didn't want to take away from all that he was doing for us when he was ill, which was, trying to keep the family together, trying to make sure that we were financially stable, me and my mum and my brother. And he just went above and beyond for all of us all the time, even when he was ill. I can't stress to you how much grace he handled his illness with. Like, it was just, I've got a chapter in my book called My Lot, which is where he talks about this just being his lot. And I was like, Dad, aren't you really angry that you're ill? And he was like, no, that's just the hand I've been dealt. This is my lot. I'm not going to get angry with it. And I had to sort of keep that in mind when I was really angry after he passed away, angry that we hadn't spoken about things, angry that, I'd been carrying this secret for not just my mum, but for my dad as well, and angry that no one had helped me with it. And I had to try and keep my dad's mantra in my head throughout the years when things got really difficult, because he went above and beyond for me in raising me when we didn't look anything alike. And he went above and beyond when he was ill. And he was just such a great dad that I had to kind of keep his words in mind when things were really tough. So yeah, it's been difficult trying to do that at times, because it's a lot to unpack on my own. And I think even if he was here, I think he probably would have still managed to handle it with grace and humility and keep the family together. I think if he was around, it wouldn't really have changed our relationship, because he always told me how much we belonged to each other. But I think it was harder to process after he was gone, and I had all these unanswered questions. That was more difficult, and I had a lot of anger and a lot of rage about dealing with that on my own. So yeah, it's been interesting, and it's been difficult to try and put all that into a book and make it concise and make it understandable and readable for other people. It sounds quite bizarre, and it sounds quite strange, and it wasn't for my whole life. For my whole life, it was just my level of normal, and that was it, really.
No, I I get that. I get that completely. And so all of a sudden, your identity and your life are being examined by yourself, and you have to, you know.
Mm,
You have to, because obviously you did it, but you didn't have to, but you had to
yes.
for you. Um, yeah, I just think this is incredibly uh, brave and powerful. Can you talk a little bit about the travelogue aspect of this, and just your sort of like, what was that like? You know, traveling around and, I don't know, just trying to find your way and identify.
Yeah, I was really privileged to be able to take time out of, interning. I was at the time, I was interning at a women's magazine. And when I got these DNA test results, I was like, right, this gives me kind of permission to go and explore this part of myself that I've been suppressing for years. Like, I write a lot about hair and Black identity in the book. And even I was too afraid to get my hair braided for years because I thought it would mark me out as such a visual outsider in my community, within my friend group. I'm the only Black person all the time. And I was worried that getting my hair braided would mark me out as this visual outsider, when obviously I was, but no one was talking about it. So getting these test results and deciding to go off to, like, I started off in Brooklyn, and then I went to Nicaragua, and then I went to Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, went to Cuba, and they were all very deliberate choices. Like, I was adrift in many ways, but I was also very much focused on wanting to live and work in places where I could see my image reflected back to me. And that was amazing. And oftentimes that was, enough just to be freelancing or to be working, in these places where I could see other people who looked like me. That was what I wanted. But also being on the road for so long was draining. I did like a year of travel, and things weren't good with me and my mom, and I was trying to get more answers from her, but there's thousands of miles between us, and we just stopped talking for many months because it was too strained, and we hadn't ever had that one-on-one chat that we got when I came back. So when I was abroad, it was difficult at times because I felt so much more alone. But it also gave me so much, in that it gave me permission to start exploring myself. It gave me permission to start dating people that looked like me. All these things that I kind of like been afraid to do because I was worried that it would make me look more Black. And it was like, well, I am Black. So like, there's no one way to look or act when it comes to that kind of stuff anyway. But at 22, I really fully believed that would separate me from my friends and family. But then I realized, they've got to come up to the level that I'm at, which is I'm on this journey of accepting myself, and we need to start having conversations about why I look the way I do and why we haven't spoken about race. And, those comments that people made when I was 12, like, let's unpack that and remember that you are talking to a Black woman. I'm not white, and that's obvious, but it also just never been spoken about for so long. So travel really gave me that space to calm myself and to also explore parts of myself that I'd tried to hide. And it also, gave me part of my career. I did a lot of travel writing, and I've got a book coming out next year, which is called Black Girls Take World, and that's all travel tips on being a Black female traveler. So it really, inspired me to do a lot more of my writing, and inspired me to write Raceless as well. I was keeping notes and kind of reading widely as I went along. And I look back now and I'm like, God, I went through more growth in those couple of years than most people go through in a decade. But at the time, you just keep going because I wanted to feel better. I didn't want to be depressed. I didn't want to be isolated from my family. I didn't want to not know myself. So I knew that I had like an objective, which is to give myself time to find myself, as it were. But that's what I wanted to do, and that's that. It was worth doing, definitely.
I was
know. Oh, go ahead.
Like, no, I just go. You go.
I was just gonna say, talking about finding yourself in reading, I loved in the book when you're talking about the different books, because you were given this heritage. So you're like, what do I do with this? I don't know where to start. I don't know where to begin. And like, I know you're talking about Americana by and right, of Ajimana. And so what books, like, where did you begin on this journey of like trying to learn more about something you just don't know anything about?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer. My first love is literature, and I studied English Lit at University of Warwick in the UK. So I just started reading more books by Black females, and I'm still on this journey, because when I was younger, I didn't really think of myself as not being seen in my childhood books. I just thought, oh great, Road Doll, Charlotte's Web, these are all great stories about young women, but I didn't think about race at all because it was not discussed. I can't tell you how little it was on my agenda. So once I started traveling, I thought, okay, right, now let me read more books by Black women, women that look like me, women of minority ethnic backgrounds. And yeah, Americana, I remember when I was traveling, someone recommended that to me, and I'd never heard of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I'd never heard of her. And now I've, read everything she's written. So she was a big influence. Brick Lane, which is a book by a British Asian author, which was amazing. Zadie Smith, Toni Morrison, Bell Hooks, all those kind of writers of fiction and non-fiction, but I started off with fiction. And then when I kind of got into the reading of Raceless, I studied a lot of kind of sociology and psychology texts, because I feel like it was really liberating to see my experiences reflected in sort of academic language, because it legitimized them in a way. So literature is always my first love, and I want to move into literature, quite soon. But in terms of non-fiction texts, there's so many sociologists and psychologists and academic writers that would write about, being adopted by white people and, what that's like in an academic world, and also people who have taken DNA tests and found the science behind them really confusing. All that non-fiction stuff really informed my reading as well. So yeah, it was just a mix, but I'd say Chimamanda was like top of the list. I really remember reading Americana right at the start of my trip and just loving it.
Yeah, that's great. I was just thinking that you really have you've packed so much into your very young life. I mean, you really are such a seeker of truth, for your own truth, your own identity, and your place. And I just applaud you. I just think this is it's
Thank you.
really quite amazing. Georgina, did you want to read a little section from the book?
Yes, I've got a little section ready. This is from a chapter called Restarting, which was when I was at the start of my travel journey. When I opened up the results from the DNA testing company that morning, I focused my attention on the ethnicity estimate section of the site. It was here, the accompanying email said, where I could find the country breakdown that would finally reveal where in the world my Blackness was from. A lifetime of being adrift between two islands without a clear anchor to either was about to end. And I was hyped. Terrified as well, that was to be expected, but truly excited to uncover more. I rested my laptop on my knees, and I could just about catch sight of myself in the screen. I saw copper-coloured skin, a deeper shade of red after months in the sun, dark shoulder-length curls of many textures that you could lose both hands in, and a wide mouth with slightly crooked teeth. I was indisputably a brown-skinned girl. I had always been that way. Yet I had lacked explanation for that simple fact my whole life. I scanned the digital map under the ethnicity estimate section, goosebumps rising on my forearms and reminding me that this was far from a normal situation on a normal day. The regions where my ancestry lay were highlighted in teal and burnt orange. But hang on just a second. There were only two areas blazing in full colour: Africa and Europe. I zoomed in. West Africa and the west coast of Ireland. I let out a gasp. I hadn't expected such a straight split or origins in West Africa. Over the years, I'd lost track of the number of times I'd been asked if I was Eritrean or Ethiopian or mixed with Indian. And so my best guess at age 22 had been hinged on a country in Africa's eastern region. I'd grown used to the ambiguity, having had no choice but to settle in it. Yet according to this site, which had processed my DNA in a lab far away from Nicaragua many weeks earlier, most of my Black ancestry originated from just one spot. I'll just leave it there. You'll have to carry on and buy the book if you want to know what the spot is. But I mean, yeah, it's not a mystery, but it's yeah, the next part of the book when I go into that.
It's beautiful, really beautiful. Listen to you read the whole book would be great.
Do you want to see some photos? You
Yes,
sent us some
please.
photos.
Yeah, that's me and my brother. He was 3. Sorry, do you want me to narrate them? I wasn't sure. Or were you just going to put a slideshow?
Well, if you have anything to say about them, if not, I'll just show a few of
Yeah, I
them.
think you should let us know who are we looking at.
Oh,
So they
yeah.
can-
Cool. Yeah, this is my parents at my dad's family home, my grandparents' home at one Christmas. That's my mum holding me and my dad. I think I was about 3 here. And this would have been in Ireland, because we spent every summer in Ireland as a family, me and my brother and my mum and my dad. But my brother wasn't born here, so that's just me and my dad and my mum holding me on her farm in Ireland where she grew up.
Beautiful. Guy, you're a cute baby.
Thank you.
Okay, now who are we looking at?
And now these are both my grannies. The one on the left, just in front of my mum, she is my mum's mum. She passed away actually just earlier this year. She lived to like 97. It was crazy. And then that's my dad and my granny, who is still alive, my dad's mum, and she is holding me. And that was, I think, at my christening. I think they'd come down to London for my christening, because my parents lived in West London at the time. So I think it was a family event on both sides. Everyone came down for it.
Wonderful. Yeah. Do we have more? Oh, God.
Yeah, this is me and my younger brother. So we were on holiday here, I think maybe France. We went to France every year as family holiday. Yeah, having a drink at a little.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think me and my younger brother have the same exact kind of like drinks.
Yeah, that's true.
The look, you know.
Yeah. Sweet. Sweet.
I hope I haven't shown this yet.
Yeah, was that? I can't remember how many I sent you. I sent a few, but
Yeah. A beautiful,
Wow.
beautiful family.
yeah, no, it was, you know, I tried to put across in the book that I had a very happy upbringing, and I was accepted by both sides of the family. And my dad's mum, who's alive, my granny, she's, you know, we're very in contact, and they've always said you're still part of the family and nothing's changed. I just had to kind of force all these conversations with them after I got my test results back. Oh, that's me and my mum in part of London, I assume.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No, that all comes across in the book. It's it just does. You can feel the love. You can feel the love between all of you. And,
Yeah.
you know, you and your dad just seemed just so special.
Yes, for sure.
I just want to get to a few questions before we bring Justine back. Probably going to go a little bit over 3, but that's okay. So, Lillian Dabney says, this is a profound memoir. Your exploration of your own identity is courageous. Couldn't agree more. It's so brave.
Oh, thank you.
Brave and brilliant and so just truth. Jennifer Winberry, how do you think your growing up would have been if you had been told the truth of your identity from the beginning?
Oh, you know, hindsight is an amazing thing, but I know, having spoken to lots of people like me who have all grappled with these secrets their whole lives and found out later on in life, and speaking to other people from DNA secret groups who have, you know, just found out their parent isn't their parent without the racial aspect to things. We've just got this common thing, which is where like our mental health completely takes a battering, and people get PTSD, people get depressed, as I was, people fall out with their families. Some of them never make up with their families because they can't deal with the level of betrayal. And I just think that being open and honest from a young age would save so much of that. And I've spoken to many people that agree, and, you know, psychologists that agree that it shouldn't be coming out, these kind of secrets, even if you kind of suspect it, but you've never really accepted it. It's different to learn truth later on in life, you know, in your late 20s, your mid 20s, 30s, 40s. These people are all similar to me in that they've had to deal with a big secret like that, and they've all really struggled with it mentally. So I think if you tell the child or the parent or whoever it is early on, it would really save a lot of heartache. And I think if I knew early on, I would have just learned to accept it, that, you know, this is my dad, but I also have, you know, a biological parent somewhere who's made me look the way that I do. And maybe I would have wanted to search for him, but maybe I wouldn't have. I would have always known the truth and it would have been my choice. But having that kind of taken away from me and learning about it after my dad, who raised me, passed away, that was really tricky. And then the impact of that, all that at once on my mental health was quite profound. So I know that from experience that dealing with these things from an early age can save a lot of mental anguish. So I think it would have done that, actually. But then maybe I wouldn't be the person that I am today, and I wouldn't have written the book, and I wouldn't have, you know, come to terms with my identity in this way. But it's definitely been something that was quite challenging at times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's a good point.
Casey Davis, which I think her question kind of goes to what I had asked you before we were going on. What responses are you getting back now that you've written this book, with your family or even outside of your family? Like, what are you hearing from people?
So my family sort of had to deal with me writing about this for the past 3 or 4 years, really. I started doing a lot of stuff in The Guardian, like you were saying, and Mary Claire, and think pieces and columns. And I think at first it was quite difficult for everyone to handle, especially my mum, because she's from an Irish Catholic upbringing that I write about in the book, and everything has to be closed off and everything has to be, you know, it's nobody else's business. And I think when she had this affair years ago, she probably thought it wouldn't come to light in terms of it being broadcast literally all over the world and in a book. It couldn't have gone more opposite to the way that she probably envisaged, but there we go.
Oh, well.
Yeah, well, yeah. Let that be a lesson. No. It's just, yeah, it's a lot for there. It was a lot for her to handle at the beginning, but I think now she's very accepting of it. And I've got a podcast that's coming out on Audible about DNA testing, and I've even interviewed her for that. And she's been so much more open than I could have ever imagined. And she's really come into her own as a different type of mother, really. So at first it was difficult for my family, but now they're very accepting of it. And my mum's read Raceless and she really liked it. And she said, you know, your dad will be proud. And a few years ago, when we started off talking about all this stuff, her reaction couldn't have been more opposite to that. So I'm really proud of sort of the journey that we've gone on as a result, and the conversations that I've had with my family. And I'm kind of used to people giving me their opinion online or whatever, like I've done some of that. So far it's been nice. And if it's not all nice, you know, it is what it is. Like it's no book is universally loved by everybody. That's what I keep telling myself. So hopefully people will find something in it that resonates with them. But if not, you know, that's fine too.
Well, it's your story. And in the end, you are you. I mean, you're the same person, you know, that you were when you were this little kid. Nothing about you has changed except that you made this courageous step to really find your truth. And I think that you know, that says so much about you. And I mean, there's just, this book is so strong, and there's so much to talk about. Yeah, it's your story. This is, you know, it's pretty powerful. I'm going to ask one last question, and then I'm going to bring Justine back. Yes, profound, courageous, so much.
Before we get to that question, where can we find the podcast? Because it's coming out in 2 days, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, it is coming out in 2 days on Audible. So it's available for everybody who signs up to Audible. If you don't sign up and you don't want to pay, you can get a free trial, I've been told. So it's out on the 19th, and yeah, it's 5 episodes, and it's called The Secrets in Us. So
Secrets in Us. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. And maybe that's a good, just a quick segue into Maureen Roberts' question, which of course now I can't find. Well, here it is. Can you share some more about the DNA testing process, and maybe just real quick on that, and then we'll bring Justine back. But I think that's worth addressing, since that's, you know, so to the heart of this.
Yeah, so the process in terms of like physically doing it is that you order a test from, you know, one of the big direct-to-consumer sites like Ancestry or MyHeritage. They send it in a little box, and it's all kind of very smooth packaging, and it's very sleek. And you quite literally get a vial and spit into it. I think that was the last one I did. They're kind of always updating their methods, but you're spitting into a little tube, and then you're sealing it, and you're sending it back to the company. I think you've already given all your details online when you ask for the box. And there's a lot to be said for kind of what you realize you're signing away when you sign up for these tests. Some of it is hidden in the terms and conditions. Some of it is hidden in the privacy concerns. You can see that some companies have shared information with, law enforcement over the years. So you really have to be informed as to what you're giving away when you ask for these $99 tests. But for me, they were definitely worth it. And I've kept all my information in the database in the hope that I find out a bit more about my extended Black family. But yeah, the process is really easy. It's really quick. They make it as easy as possible because they want your data. So it's definitely nothing too taxing. And it'll be interesting to see, I think, how the industry pans out over the next few years.
It's very interesting. Oh, am I still muted? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. So thank you very much for sharing your life with us, literally, and for putting it down on the pages of this book. And it's an important conversation. Yeah. So why don't we bring Justine back, and then it would just be really neat to just talk to both of you, since it's really some, as I say, hello.
Hello.
Can you hear us? Justine, can you hear us?
Yes.
Hello. So I hope that you were able to catch some of Georgina's talk.
I did.
Oh my goodness.
It's so interesting how when you uncover secrets in your family and you write a memoir, there's just different, our stories are so different, but then in the same way, there's certain themes that are so similar. Don't have secrets in your family.
Yeah,
That's one good takeaway.
yeah. Do not do this. Anyone that's watching and thinking,
Yeah, that's as I said, we were talking about how damaging that can be, because in the end they do come out, and we were talking before about lady, you want to talk about the art of writing the memoir?
The art of writing.
Well, we were talking about what it's like to write a memoir, and then how it would be fun to start a group or have another one of these things where Justine and Georgina are on here as like real in the weeds and just beginning, and then to have a memoirist that could tell you this is how it worked for me, and this is sort of not the fallout, but of course how people respond to these things, because as you say, even Georgina, there was a little bit of resistance first time around, and it's a journey, and people have to sometimes
up to your level. Yeah, no, for sure. And we were saying about having a Facebook group for memoir writers who write family memoirs, because I think it's a special kind of memoir, isn't it, when you're writing about other people and some of them aren't here anymore, and then maybe your friends or your family have got opinions about the way you portray people, and that's always going to happen in a memoir. But I think for family memoirs, they kind of are particularly they lend themselves particularly to that worry. I don't know if you were worried at all, Justine, but I was definitely worried the first few times I started writing about my family.
Oh no, I've for me, it was really when I HarperCollins, when I got my publishing contract, I always thought the story of my mother, my grandfather, my grandmother, and the founding hospital were just so fascinating to me. But my editor, who I love and adore, made me talk a little bit more about myself, and just kept pushing and pushing. And so now the book really has a lot of me in it. And it's such a heady experience to know that a book is coming out that's going to contain things that I really only tell to my closest friends, but it's going to be in print. And so getting my head around that has been something. But when you start getting the feedback in, you realize that people are resonating with what it is, with what you've experienced, and then it's no longer this strange experience, but you're having some sort of connection that I didn't really expect.
Yeah, I think I've had that consistently since I started writing in The Guardian. I will get people, near on a weekly basis saying, I've just taken a DNA test and I've uncovered this. How do I deal with it? Do you have any ways to signpost me to anything? Is there anything I should do? How do I talk to my mom or my dad? like I've had that for quite a while, and I anticipate that it's going to keep on going. But it can be quite difficult to deal with that. Like, certainly it's been difficult for me when I've had, you know, mums saying, how will I talk to my brown child about race? And I'm like, I don't even have a houseplant that I can keep alive for longer than 6 months. Like, I don't know how to give parental advice. I'm like 20, I was like 25 when I got that message. I was like, I don't know what to say to these people, and I don't know what the answer is. Like, I want to respond to everybody, but I don't want to misdirect anyone either. So I think that will be something maybe you'll learn to deal with as well, or maybe you've already had that, I'm not sure.
No one has asked me for parenting advice just yet, so
Well,
we'll see
stay
what
tuned.
happens.
Yeah, right. And I think it's worth noting again that you know, you're talking to librarians now, and book clubs are you know, so many book clubs are run through libraries, and so both of these books are so complex and so full of talking points and so much to discuss. And so, you know, you've both been so wonderful today, just sharing your lives with us. And I appreciate you, Lainey and I both do. And, you know, to talk to book groups, I think, as you both said, you know, you're sort of surprised at how many people, there's something there. There's something that's ticking. It's not exactly the same. Your stories obviously aren't the same. And yet you're speaking about things that are the same. And you know, it's really, there's a lot there. And I think this goes back to, you know, when we're kids, and what are you told and what are you not told, and what do you believe, and then how do you make that right in your head, and what do you have to do to get one foot in front of the other and make it okay and figure it out. And I think you've both done that with these books, with these stories, with your bravery and your intelligence to put these down, to capture how you feel, and you are making people proud. Georgina, your father would be proud. I mean, it's really something. So thank you both so much. Lainey, I don't mean to rush it, but I also want to make sure that we get questions in. So Lainey, are there more that everybody's just saying how much they're loving this, and two brilliant authors and outstanding and incredibly interesting family stories. A librarian said, listening nearly at the end, I'm sure I can listen to an archive. Yes, you can, Maria. This will all be archived on Facebook Live and also on YouTube. So you can go back and watch it all over again. Lainey, anybody else?
Well, lots of good comments. Jennifer Winberry said, fascinating and complimentary memoirs. And I think that's a great way to round us out, because they're so different, but we have those strands that pull us together, and we all have things in our past that we have to reconcile with. So thank you. And these are very important things to talk about. We're honored that you spent time talking about it with us.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Please, our pleasure, our honor. This was really lovely and informative and powerful. The Secret Life of Dorothy Soames by Justine Cowan. That goes on sale on January 12th, 2021. And Raceless by Georgina Lawton. That goes on sale February 23rd, 2021. So in the meantime, we'll have some e-galleys, and we'll be happy to share with you, and we'd love to know what you all think. And thank you for joining us today and for listening to these two amazing women talk about their stories. So thank you, Justine. Thank you, Georgina.
Thank you very much, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Don't forget, if you want them to come to your library virtually, let us know. We'll set it up.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Be well. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.